Sup, nerds? Prey is a 2017 first-person shooter, action-adventure, immersive simulator, whatever the hell that means, I still don't know. It flew under my radar until the year of our Lord 2022 for unimportant reasons. I forgot it existed, okay? And I'm really glad I finally got around to playing it because, man, Prey is just... But mind-blowing memes aside, is Prey good? Okay, so Prey is like... so good. And then it's kind of cool, and then it's kind of... meh. And then it's... but then it's like, whoa, so good. And then it's... and then it's like, are you kidding me? This is the most incredible, holy hell. Why did I wait so long to play this? Yeah, Prey's like that. There's a whole list of reasons why Prey stands out. From strong art direction, an immersive, unique setting, a great soundtrack by Mick freaking Gordon, of all people. If you're the type of gamer that gets happy in the pants when a game assembles a giant toolkit of abilities, solutions, and, well, tools for you to approach the game with, then just kind of chucks the whole toolkit at your feet and says, go on, figure it out, just don't die, then does Prey have a chub-inducing experience for you? While all of the above elements do shine quite nicely, none of these are what captivated me about Prey, nor what will stick most prominently in my mind when I think about it. No, I'll instead remember Prey for how uncertain it made me feel every time it brought up its centrally reoccurring question. It is the driving question that we, even until the very last moment of the game, might not fully know the answer to. What is real? Let's take this opportunity to throw out a spoiler warning before we go any further. I'm not going to go through a moment-by-moment in-depth exploration of everything in Prey, but a huge, and I mean huge, aspect of what makes Prey such a special little mindfuck of a game will be spoiled in its entirety, including pretty much the entire ending, which is a very integral part to exactly what Prey is. If you have any intention of ever playing and experiencing Prey for yourself, mute this tab, close it, let it play in the background, because, you know, your boys' watch hours and all that. Go play Prey. Do it. It's a great game. And then come back for the discussion of exactly what it is that makes the game so special when you're finished. If you've already played Prey for yourself, it's time to beat the mind game. Or talk about it anyways. Whatever.
Now it's time to beat the mind game. Now it's time to beat the mind game. And now it's time to beat the mind game. And now it's time to beat the mind game.
Prey is set in an alternate reality near future with several key historical differences. The JFK assassination was botched, for example, and the space race ended up taking an abrupt turn when an old Soviet satellite back in 1958 ended up encountering something rather sinister, sneaky, and, well, goopy. From here, history unfolded differently from our current reality, and technology made some advancements that we don't currently enjoy, particularly in the realm of space science. We play as Morgan Yu, and we can either be a male or female. The male option had a superior beard game in comparison to the female, so that's the one I went with. He still needs to step it up though.
Good morning, Morgan. Today is Monday, March 15th, 2032.
We wake up in our apartment ready to go to a job interview or something. Who cares? We get on a helicopter, take a ride across the city, and honestly, it has some of the coolest vibes of any opening sequence that I've played in a game. We arrive at our destination, talk to our brother about going to space soon, then go through a series of mundane, meaningless tests, then watch a scientist get eaten alive by a black goo monstrosity.
Oh my god! Security! Security!
Good morning, Morgan. Today is Monday, March 15th, 2032.
We wake up in our apartment ready to go to a job interview or something. Who cares? Huh. Well, that's weird. Let's just go to the helicopter, and that's a dead body. Huh. Well, that's weird. The trauma of seeing a dead body unlocks a deeply suppressed memory of a virulent hatred of windows. So we're gonna go bully the hell out of this one specifically, and... Huh. Well, that's weird. Prey is at its best when it explores things like deja vu, barely noticeable changes, and the understanding that our perceptions are not necessarily to be trusted. These elements shine most brilliantly in the beginning sections of the game, and the window break is the singular moment where this is at its best. It is the moment that Prey boldly declares this game is not going to be what you think it is. We won't see this idea realize its fullest potential until the very last moments of the game. But these themes stay strong and consistent enough through enough of the game to get us through to the finish line, even if the game takes some notable stumbles around the halfway mark of the game. Prey throws a number of enemies, challenges, and obstacles your way throughout the game, all of which have a wide variety of solutions to overcome. One of the most constant and intriguing threats Prey puts in our way is the Mimic, the very first enemy you encounter after breaking out of the simulation. There are a few different iterations of the Mimic, but all of them sum up one centrally compelling feature. The Mimic camouflages itself, hiding in plain sight by appearing as a copy of nearly any object in the environment. It remains hidden and waiting until it either has the perfect opportunity to strike, or you discover the alien sludge spider looking thing by staring at it for too long, attacking it, or luring it out by some other means. The Mimic's introduction as the first and foremost threat that we encounter is purposefully and deliberately when we are at our most confused and vulnerable. We emerge from the false reality of the apartment simulation and onto the space station of Talos 1, where every room, every discovery, every piece of information cements just how far removed from reality the repeating simulation that we were trapped in was. Naturally, we, the player, are likely to be suspicious and a bit on guard after the simulation's big reveal, as we, like Morgan Yu himself, have no real idea where we are, what's going on around us, and how much of the reality presented by the simulation is actually true. Who murdered the person outside of our room? Did the kitchen in our apartment work? Could we have whipped up a delicious spaghetti dinner, or was the spaghetti in the cupboard a lie as well? Were the giant Bethesda and Prey billboards during our not real helicopter ride actually part of the simulation? Or is that just part of the game? Is the game the simulation? Am I in a simulation right now? We're introduced to the Mimics before we get any of these answers. On top of all of our existing confusion from the bizarre, disorienting reality shift unfolding around us, is added the Mimics with their deceptive tactics, forcing us to question everything around us, examining every detail under a microscopic scrutiny. Was that chair there before? Did that lamp on the desk move? Is it weird and out of place for this wastebasket to be in the middle of the room? Wait, that really was a wastebasket. So does that mean that stuff can be seemingly out of place but totally benign? All of the uncertainty and confusion we feel toward the events of the game, the plot, all the details of our surroundings and how we got here and why we were in the simulation to begin with. All of these questions and doubts and confusions are made tangibly manifest and applied to a direct game mechanic, specifically the Mimic and its camouflage abilities, and that interweaving of game mechanic and world building and theme, and the way they all work together to keep the player disoriented and confused and full of questions is a very strong high point for Prey. The beginning phases of the game, where all of this confusion and curiosity and more than a little bit of dread are all interwoven through gameplay and narrative, is honestly where all the world building is at its peak. The vibe is just perfectly tense and uncertain, and the game really shines, which is all the more unfortunate when it begins to lose its luster. I'm gonna try to be fair here, mostly because in a few moments I'm gonna kind of brutalize Prey a little bit, and I want to do my best to balance that out. some of the lost luster of Prey's unique world building and gameplay elements, that is, the constant feeling of uncertainty and second-guessing everything around you, that's going to come down to a fairly natural process in progression in the game. With a main storyline of around 16 hours or so, which can easily stretch to 27 to 30 hours if you run through all of the side quests and optional content, Prey isn't a short game by any means. This much runtime means that Mimic hide and seek and all of the tension and atmospheric dread that comes with it becomes paper thin by around the middle of the game. By then, you've dealt with so many mimics, gone through the whole routine of searching through your surroundings for any incongruency so many times that all the novelty starts to wear off, and you as the player have fully adapted to the threat of anything potentially being a threat by mid-game. Power creep further adds to the dissolution of the tension and dread of the early game. You do a good deal of evolving throughout the game in terms of powers, abilities, technology, weaponry, stats, and overall arsenal, that at some point the mimics just kind of stop being much of a threat to your survival. Sure, there are other more significant dangers that you have to face throughout the mid and late game, as you run into more and more deadly and sophisticated forms of the Typhon, the alien species infesting Talos 1, which the mimics are only one subspecies. But the mimics themselves, even though they have several more advanced forms later on throughout the game, never present the same threat, challenge, or foreboding presence that they have in the early game when you're still learning. This, combined with dealing with them so frequently throughout the early game, and the game never really necessitating a change in tactics or approach when combating the mimics, means that eventually they just aren't worrisome anymore. At mid-game, mimics can hardly damage you. They will go down in one shot of almost anything in your arsenal, and you've dealt with them for so long that you just kind of accept that they're probably around somewhere, but they can't hurt you, so who really cares? All of this is bad enough, but then bafflingly, Arcane made it worse, and this is where I'm going to have to drag Prey over the coals. My gripes here are twofold, so bear with me. Arcane really need to figure out a solution to the waning of the unique atmosphere, vibe, and challenge presented by the mimics, and indeed the early segments of Prey in general. We have this interesting, compelling opening where we are thrown repeatedly into more and more confusion as we encounter moments that completely reorient our perspective of the world around us. The opening sequence and first few hours of the game are brilliantly planned and executed, intentional moves that line us up for surprise after surprise, each moment, be it in the narrative or the gameplay itself, throwing us off balance and making us question what is real, what is an elaborate ruse, and whether that ruse is sinister or benign. As far as story and plot elements go, there is a lull throughout the middle of the game where we are taken out of that confused, disoriented, what is going on, what is real, what is reality moments that we find ourselves in so strongly in the opening portions of the game. I don't really claim to have the answers for how to extend those early moments where it is full of confusion and questions and we don't know what's real and we don't know what we're being lied to about. But I will say that by the end of the game, we are thrown right back into that feeling. We are as confused, if not more so, than ever before. It is absolutely possible to put us back into these confused, searching moments. There are literal flashes of moments that we get throughout the game that give us a glimpse, just a glimpse of these elements.
You're not what they say you are.
Rejecting the new cell lines, fighting them off like an antivirus.
They're afraid.
No. Nothing that interferes with memory formation.
But they feel entirely too brief and ultimately wasted. And more than that, they don't feel meaningfully connected to much of anything. I like to think that a lot of the very vague and abstract nature of these flash moments are there to keep the player guessing and off guard, so that the ending is that much more of a surprise, and it was. But I still can't help but feel like these didn't quite land. And there was massive potential for more buildup and more disorienting, strange moments that really made us question just what the hell is going on. On the gameplay side of things, the falling off of mimics and everything they bring to the gameplay loop is unfortunate. The subtle tension and need to really pay attention to your surroundings as you make your way throughout Talos 1 is replaced with bigger, more direct Typhon threats as the cat and killer mouse game gives way to more traditional direct firefights. There are, of course, multiple ways to take on these new threats. You don't necessarily have to go guns blazing, as the game does provide a lot of different options. But it's never quite the same as when your main interaction with your adversaries is find the mimic. Honestly, the other Typhon enemies aren't even bad. They have a wide range of abilities and ways that they can threaten you, and they really do force you to make use of a broad range of abilities, specialties, and power-ups that you have at your disposal. I really have some difficulty down talking all of the fights, encounters, and situations and challenges that you find yourself in after the mimics are no longer a factor, because all those parts of the game are pretty well designed and enjoyable too. Granted, Prey does drag in some places, and that does lower my overall enjoyability of the game. I can't really call it a flawless masterpiece because of some of the pacing issues that it has, and I'm going off script here because I totally forgot about this part while I was writing this, but Arcane makes an even huger misstep in the whole problem with the Mimic, because not only do they have power creep going on where you no longer fear the Mimic because it doesn't really fucking do anything to you anymore, but on top of all of that, they nerf the Mimic even harder when you get your special visor that can actually detect them in the environment when you put it on, like special Witcher vision or Batman vision or whatever the fuck, right? You literally get the ability to see the Mimics without even having to discern them. So not only are they no longer dangerous to you, but you can just negate their ability to hide completely. What the fuck, Arcane? Why would you do this? Getting stronger, a sense of progression, and power creep are one thing, but to completely take all tension out of the most unique element of the game, what happened? Aside from the very obvious change of taking the visor out so you can't automatically detect the mimics and make them completely pointless for the later parts of the game, there is such an easy fix for this. Even as we progress through the games and we run into all these other Typhon types, all these different threats that vary up the gameplay and present different looks for us to contend with, even as we become more powerful and more capable, mimics should have never stopped being the worst threat that we encounter. Now, I get it, the mimics are just this weird little spidery, goopy alien thing, and then we run into much bigger goopy alien things that look like people, and then demons, and then all this crazy stuff. I don't care. The mimics should have stayed the central threat, because they are where all the atmosphere and uncertainty came from. And it would have been fairly easy to keep them powerful throughout the whole game. I honestly feel like it would have been totally fine for there to be mimics throughout the late game that could one-shot kill us. That would have been such an interesting element to add into things. Mimics would have kept their fear factor. We would have constantly been on the lookout for them, constantly scanning our environment without the stupid visor to help us this time. And even as we're running into bigger and bigger threats, we still throughout all of it think in the back of our minds, what if there's a mimic here? Just imagine you come into a room with one of the more threatening types of Typhon, one of the bigger guys, one of the harder hitters, and you think to yourself, okay, I know how to deal with this situation. I know how to take this guy on. I have the equipment. I have the abilities. I can handle this. No problem. But what if, as I'm dealing with him, there's a mimic hidden somewhere, lurking in the shadows, and that strike is no longer going to be the rinky-dink little sliver of health that the end game mimics in the actual Prey do? Now, that strike is going to kill you as long as it hits you. And that strike could come from almost anywhere. Tension restored, dread intact, the creeping sense that reality itself is working against me as my perceptions betray me is maintained, and that is an important part of Prey's formula. With all of the above said, I'm going to acknowledge that I played Prey on the normal difficulty. I know for sure that on higher difficulties, Prey presents significantly more challenge and hindrance than in the normal difficulty game, with both penalties and debuff statuses being woven liberally into the game, more scarcity of resources, and other difficulty heightening factors. And with all of these things in play and some damage reworking on mimics, it's entirely possible that mimics remain a credible, real, lasting threat throughout the whole game's runtime. If that's the case, then I clearly missed out on the superior version of Prey, and you guys can get in the comments and rub it in my face if you want to. That said, I can't help but feel balancing the normal difficulty to present the same level of sustained engagements with mimics and the fundamental challenge they present is a real stumble, even if they did manage to pull it off at higher difficulties. Despite falling short in several areas, Prey makes up for its shortcomings in enough strong, well-realized key areas, particularly in gameplay and world building, that by the late game, I was prepared to say that Prey was a solid, if flawed, game that I thoroughly enjoyed and was prepared to recommend to others. Then in its final moments, in brilliant symmetry to Prey's intro, Arcane pulled the damn rug out from under me again.
It's finished. How did it do? Activation of the mirror neurons is promising. Empathy quotient shows to be exceptionally high.
It probably thinks it was dreaming, that nothing mattered.
You're assuming it thinks like us.
Its life depends on it. Ours too. It all comes down to the choices it made.
It saved me from the cargo container. I would have suffocated otherwise, and later it recovered the Lightner connectomes. They were of no practical use, except that they were deeply meaningful to me. It's remarkable that it never installed a single Typhon-based neuromod. In my view, this demonstrates a strong identification with us, but its most surprising act was sparing Da. While perhaps for purely selfish reasons, this, at least in principle, enabled others to escape Talos 1.
Michaela.
I would have died without my medication. That wasn't easy. That says a lot, I think, about its heart. Can I say that it has a heart? It also found my father's records. And then, I did not expect this, but it let me listen to them. Despite the self-incriminating content, it was willing to make itself vulnerable. Then, there was a man in psychotronics, Ingram. It let him go. Was that mercy?
Would you let it live?
Yes.
Sarah, you're next.
The situation in the cargo bay was bad. None of us would have survived without its help, and it destroyed a large number of Typhon across the station. That has to be a good sign. Further, it thwarted Dar's attempt to use us as hostages. If it were one of my officers, I would give it a commendation.
Danielle, what do you say?
It found me. It didn't need to, but it did. I asked it to stop Volunteer 37, but it left him alive. It could mean a low drive for retribution. There were a lot of humans controlled by the Typhon that it could have harmed. Seems like it went out of its way to avoid that. I think it's worth the risk.
In the end, it chose to destroy Talos 1. Why? To protect Earth? We can't really know what its motives were for anything it did.
But we have to make a choice. You can hear us, can't you? Here. I want to show you something. What you experienced was a reconstruction based on Morgan's memories. This is the world today. We spent years trying to put what you can do into us. We never tried putting what we can do into you. Until now. You're the bridge between our species. I need to know if you see us. I mean, really see us. Take my hand if you do. We're gonna shake things up, like old times.
The reveal that you actually were in a simulation, that the entirety of your experience through every moment of the game until the very end wasn't even real in the first place, that the very beginning of the game was a simulation within a simulation, turned my whole view of the game and its events on its head. There are so many points where your actions and decisions, no matter how seemingly minor, play a fundamental part in determining who your protagonist, who isn't even Morgan Yu but is instead a freaking Typhon, actually is, and whether they can be trusted to become a bridge between humanity and the Typhon, who took over the freaking world, by the way. The amount of rapid recontextualization that you have to go through in the very last 5 minutes of the game is freaking brilliant. This is the type of twist ending that would make M. Night Shyamalan full mass salute in the middle of church. The sort of complete change in perspective that makes you mull over almost every step of your journey and really question what was real. And that's just it. None of it was. It was all an elaborate manipulation from start to finish. By the simulation, by Alex, by the game itself. Then there are the questions. There are so many small, strange, unanswered details throughout the game. Like why, if Alex was the one behind the simulation the entire time, did he present himself so poorly? If you take the time to scour your way through the many logs, databases, emails, and voice messages spread throughout Talos 1, almost all of them paint Alex deeply unfavorably, fluctuating between presenting him as incompetent, self-absorbed, overly ambitious, and even downright tyrannical and evil at times. I struggle to remember a single reference to Alex as a good person, if I'm honest. And even Morgan and really the entire U family are presented as pretty despicable people obsessed with their own ambitions and designs for wealth and power, not to mention deeply unethical practices in the pursuit of new technology and knowledge. These are only a few of many questions brought up around the simulated reality of the entire game's events, and I love that. I love that I moved toward the ending feeling relatively satisfied with everything that unfolded, and convinced that I was going to escape Talos 1 to see another day, only to have the entirety of reality rearranged in so profound a way that I was left groping for answers and wrestling with questions that I didn't even know were there until 5 minutes before the final credits rolled. The ending of Prey is one that cemented the game in my mind. While I enjoyed the game overall, without the ending, I probably would have ended up forgetting about it and just cycling it into the back of my mind as a pretty decent little shooter space simulator type game with some interesting, unique early game elements and an overall satisfying power fantasy by the end game, but that would have been about it. But with the ending, I will never forget this twist. I will never forget how thoroughly they kept it hidden until the very end, where they slap you in the face with the revelation of what has really been happening. And the kicker of it all is they pulled it off. Most of the time with this kind of ending, it was all a dream, it was never real, it was all fake. It feels cheap, contrived, and like an easy way out for lazy writing. In Prey's case, I feel like they framed the entirety of the game around how to make this ending work. And when you go back and you run the sequence of events and everything that you've seen and how it all played out through your mind, even though there are some gaps and unanswered questions, which I feel like were left that way on purpose, ultimately, to take a line from the big boss of Bethesda himself,
all of this just works. It just works.
While playing Prey, I felt a sort of deja vu from my playthrough of Control. Like Prey, Control suffered from a strong opening, a lull in pacing throughout the middle, and a shockingly good, game-changing ending. Check out my review on Control somewhere around here for full details. Thank you to my Patreons and the YouTube channel members who support my content. If you'd like to support a beard on the internet talking about cool stuff in video games, subscribe to my Patreon for as low as $1 or become a channel member here on YouTube for as low as $3. Links for Patreon and YouTube channel membership in the description below. Until next time, remember, just because twist endings can recontextualize and completely redeem a game does not mean we should let M. Night Shyamalan anywhere near them. Stay salty, nerds.